have a door.
The next two items are item number 22 and item number 23. Item number 22 is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, docket number 15-7451, block 1265, lot 7501, 1250 Avenue of the Americas, Rockefeller Center, an individual landmark, an office tower, which is part of an Art Deco-style commercial office and entertainment complex designed by the Associated Architects and built in 1932 to 33. And this is an application to replace the marquees. Item number 23 is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, docket number 15-7278, block 1265, lot 7501, 30 Rockefeller Plaza, Rockefeller Center, an individual landmark, a skyscraper, which is part of an Art Deco-style commercial building, a commercial office and entertainment complex designed by the Associated Architects and built in 1931 to 33. And this is an application to replace neon signs at the tower and incised signs at the bases.
Okay, Captain Red, Preservation Department staff introducing Cass Stackelberg, applicant for this double proposal.
We're going to do them sequentially. Thank you, Catherine. Good.
Thank you, Catherine. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Cass Stackelberg, Higgins Square Park Partners. As Catherine said, we'll be proposing or presenting two applications for on behalf of our client Comcast and NBC Universal. And I'm joined today by Andrew Fawcett, who is Senior Vice President in the Law Department of NBC Universal, and Michael Gavellini from Gavellini Shepherd and the rest of our esteemed team. As Catherine said, there are two applications that we will be proposing and presenting today. One is for 30 Rockefeller Plaza, and the other is for 1250 Avenue of the Americas. 30 Rockefeller Plaza historically was known as the RCA Building. 1250 Avenue of the Americas historically was known as the RCA Building West. And the work that we're proposing on behalf of Comcast and NBC Universal carries forward the continued historical use of these buildings as the center of broadcasting for NBC, both for radio initially and soon after for television. The work at 30 Rockefeller Plaza includes replacing the illuminated signage at the top of the building. The signage that is there today is actually the third generation signage at the top of the building, and as well replacing signage at the four primary building entries to the building on the Plaza, 49th and 50th, and the Avenue Americas entries. That's the first application. The second application is at 1250 Avenue Americas, and it involves taking down two 1990s marquees and recladding a third with a new marquee that's been inspired by the historic marquees on 49th and 50th Street. And the new marquee there is tied to a whole new program of circulation. You saw some of that back in January. You approved some work in the lobby of 30 Rockefeller Plaza. This is part of that entire overall project. And as well, the marquee, as you'll see in the second piece of our presentation, also sort of celebrates the return of the Tonight Show to Rockefeller Center. It had obviously decamped to California in 1972, and has come back this year as with the host, Jimmy Fallon as the host. So that marquee sort of ties in wayfinding and information about the show. So before we get into the design presentation, I'm going to have Andrew Fawcett speak briefly about Comcast and its historical connection, or its new connection with NBC.
Sure. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners. I'm Andrew Fawcett. I'm a Senior Vice President in the NBC Universal Law Department.
That's a microphone, believe it or not.
Then I'll stand close to it. As Cass mentioned, ever since Rockefeller Center opened, it has been NBC's home. It's been a center of broadcasting, both radio and the nascent television technology that came about shortly after the center opened. As you know, NBC was originally owned by RCA. In 1986, it was purchased by GE. In January of 2011, Comcast Corporation, a cable company headquartered in Philadelphia, bought 51% of NBC, and in March of 2013, it bought out GE's remaining interest and therefore became the owner of all the common equity in NBC Universal. At the same time, Comcast purchased the commercial condominium units within 30 Rockefeller Plaza that NBC was occupying. So for the first time in many, many years, NBC is now an owner of its own space. This was a significant acquisition for Comcast. NBC makes up a much bigger portion of Comcast than it did for GE, such that Comcast actually took the Peacock logo and incorporated that into the official Comcast logo. So now when you see the official Comcast logo, it incorporates the peacock to signify that we are now part of the Comcast family. In the history of this, the corporate parent owner of NBC has always had its name on the building, first with RCA, then with GE. Given Comcast's acquisition of NBC and also the acquisition of its space within the building, it follows suit that they are making this application for your consideration. Comcast does view its acquisition of NBC Universal as a long-term investment. It is cognizant and appreciative of the history that NBC shares with 30 Rockefeller Plaza and is generally supportive of this application. And we thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much for that background. Okay, Cass.
So obviously, this is the top of 30 Rockefeller Plaza as it appears today, with the 24-foot tall GE signage at the top. But historically, soon after the building's completion in 1933, this is sort of the earliest photo that we found of the building. Historically, there were 3 large letters, RCA, positioned at the top of 30 Rockefeller Plaza. They were positioned on the north and south sides. Those signs were 24 feet tall. And on the west side, the sort of narrow west elevation, you can see here, these signs, these letters were 18 feet tall. They were called out as, in the New York Times when they first were illuminated, as the world's loftiest sign. And they were positioned, as you can see, to the west of the top of the building, sort of across the western half, perhaps this being the Rainbow Room, perhaps to steer clear of those windows. The building, the sign itself is said to have been a sort of white amber color historically. We have both a color photo here and a black and white, obviously a significant element in the cityscape, meant to be seen both sort of from the pedestrian level, but also very much from the urban scale. In 1968, RCA changed their logo and subsequently changed the signage at the top of the building this is a daytime view and a nighttime view. And they changed the logo, positioned it basically in the same place at the top of the building, and changed the lighting from this sort of whitish amber color to red neon. That is the condition that the building was in, and that was the sign on the top of the building when it was designated in 1985. Subsequently, under commission review in 1988, the GE, which then owned the portion of NBC, came before the commission and received an approval for removing the RCA sign and installing the current GE sign that's in its place. And as part of that application was also replacing the signage of the building entries, which we'll talk about briefly in a moment. The existing sign, as I said, can be seen in some locations from the surrounding streets, but really is largely seen from above, sort of from the surrounding buildings, from the Empire State Building and the growing towers that now circle around Rockefeller Center. Some views up at the top of the building on the setbacks, just so you can sort of see what the current sign is constructed of. It's basically an aluminum box with neon tubing set within the box. And this is quite similar to the historic signage as well, from what we've found in our research. Just a simple aluminum frame with neon signage set in. It's anchored or hung from steel angles that are anchored into the limestone. Some existing elevations, just to give you a sense of the building scale and the current position of the signage. The GE is centered, roughly centered on the elevation of the tower, whereas historically the RCA sign was sort of shifted to the west. The proposed signage here, again now shifted somewhat to the west on these elevations, incorporates the Comcast logo, which has the Comcast name and the NBC peacock above it. Because of the space on the west elevation, there's a proposal just for the peacock. And the scale of the signage is consistent with the historic signage that was there beginning in the 1930s. These next images are views from around the building and above. As you walk around the building, the closer you are, there is some obscuring, as there is currently. There is some obscuring of the sign obviously as you get further away. These views from 6th Avenue and about 46th Street, day and night. The setbacks do obscure portions of the sign, but as you move further away from the building, these views from Central Park, nighttime views, you get the long views and you take in the entire logo at the top of the building. Again, it's proposed for both the north side, the west side, and then the mirror image of the north side on the south side, similar to the existing signage and the signage that has been there since the late 1930s. Views from the Empire State Building. These are sort of hard to read, but the existing signage during the day, it's not illuminated. It doesn't read particularly clearly, but obviously at night it's really when it pops, and it's going to be, I think, a great prominent addition to the skyline. This aerial view of during the day. So again, this is the north side of the building and the west side of the building, and then the proposed view during the day. Long views from the west, a daytime view of the existing on the left and proposed on the right, and nighttime views showing the same. We've done some comparable elevations, just showing you the sort of position and scale of the letterings for the RCA signage, again on the north, south, and west sides. Historically, it was detailed at 18 feet tall on the west side, 24 feet tall on the east side. The GE sign is in that same location and the same dimensions, and the proposed Comcast signage, a bit difficult to read in this slide, but maybe perhaps easier in your handouts. Similarly, it's detailed about 24 feet tall on the north and south sides, and 18 feet tall on the west side. I should say this effort in designing this and positioning it and detailing it has been very much of a collaborative effort. It's an effort between Comcast and their partners at Rockefeller Center, Tishman's Fire Properties, but in terms of the design, it's been very much of a collaboration between Galilini Shepherd, Graham, and Robert Silman Associates, who's assisting with the actual attachment of the sign back to the building. Some details of the signage. It's going to be illuminated with an LED technology, but the way the LEDs have been detailed, it will read like a neon tube. So if you can see these sort of axonometric views, there are linear LEDs which are illuminated similar to a neon tube. The peacock symbol on the west side has 3 bands of LED, and then the signage on the north and south will have 2, and it's sort of set with this sort of paired letter form. It's a sans serif font, which is Comcast's logo font. Fortunately, sort of very similar to the RCA sans serif font. We feel it's actually quite sympathetic with that Art Deco aesthetic that was there originally. On the left, detail elevation and section illustrating how the existing sign is installed, and then details on the right showing how the new sign will be installed very much in the same manner as the current sign and the proposed sign. It will be attached to metal angles, which will then in turn be anchored into the limestone. There'll be no attachments to the cast aluminum panels. And working, as I said, with Robert Silman, Nat Oppenheimer in Robert Silman's office, there's been an effort to minimize the number of attachments and sort of horizontal anchor points so that we can minimize the attachment points back to the limestone. Just a comparative view of the overlay of the Comcast signage with the RCA sign. Overall, similar height. The letters are a bit smaller because of the way the Comcast logo works. But you can see in terms of its positioning, it's quite similar to the position of the RCA signage. And then again, an overlay with the GE signage, a bit difficult to see in this slide, but as I said, the GE sign tends to be sort of a bit more centered on the tower, whereas the RCA sign was shifted a bit toward the west. And then we put together a few images, sort of precedent images. Probably the best precedent for this sign changes is 30 Rockefeller Plaza itself. The sign that is there today is actually the 3rd generation signage at the top of the building. The proposed sign would be the fourth. So this is an original view here on the lower left of the building in the 1930s, 1940s, and the building as it appears today. The commission has seen other similar kinds of signage, rooftop signs, that have changed over time. The Germania Life building, as it was originally called at Union Square and 17th Street, they themselves changed their name from Germania Life after World War I to Guardian Life. And then subsequently, when the building was converted to hotel use, it was, the sign at the roof was reviewed by the commission and approved. And on the bottom right is a photograph of the New York Times building on West 43rd Street. There's an approval for replacing the illuminated signage on the top of that building for a new tenant, illuminated tenant signage. So the commission has seen other signs similar to this. And obviously, Rockefeller Plaza, 30 Rockefeller Plaza, is sort of a precedent unto itself. I'm going to continue, and we'll sort of take...
Yeah, do that. Keep going.
Good. Okay.
Absolutely.
So the second component of this application, similar, the signage of the roof, the tops of the building was reviewed by the commission. The change from from RCA to GE was reviewed by the commission in 1988. And in that application was also a change for signage at the base of the building. There are four primary entries to 30 Rockefeller Plaza. These photographs here illustrate the entries on the plaza. There are also entries on West 49th and West 50th Street and Avenue of the Americas. The proposal here is to replace the current signage that says GE building with signage that has the Comcast logo and says Comcast building. The granite that is there today is not original. It was replaced when the GE signage went in. So this would again be the sort of third generation of granite, and it will go in as was the original condition, these large monolithic panels of deer isle granite. This I think we can go through relatively quickly, views on the plaza with the great Lee Laurie sculpture group, and then an existing view on the left and a proposed view on the right. Letters are approximately the same size. This is an existing elevation. We are only talking about this pier and this pier. These two outer piers, this provides the building address, and this has the 1932 at the date when construction began for the building. Those will be untouched. So the change is only occurring at the two flanking piers to the central entry to the building here on Rockefeller Plaza. Some detail images. The GE building, these individual letters are 8 1/4 inches tall. Are proposed slightly smaller at 7 1/2. The overall height, though, because the letters or the names need to be stacked, will be slightly taller than the existing. Going around the building, this is the existing view and a proposed view. This is on 49th Street under the existing marquee. Similar here because the panels are a bit narrower and they have this radius. The letters need to be stacked as with the GE sign, and the Comcast sign will be the same.
Quick question while you're on that.
Yes.
The font, I noticed that the font in the GE is different than the font in the Comcast.
Correct.
Is any one of them supposed to match either the existing font for the rest of the building or some other font?
It's their logo.
Or is that their logo? It could look different than the one on the roof.
It is meant
It's
to be the same.
emblem
It's sort of
kind
a
of.
simple, sorry,
The
sans serif sign, which I think is similar. We weren't able to find, this historically said RCA building. We weren't able to find good photographs of that, but the assumption is that the original signage was very similar to the signage up at the top of the building, a sort of sans serif letter. So existing and proposed elevations on 49th Street, and again, these will be new monolithic panels of deer isle granite, similar to what is there today. There'll be an incised letter with gold paint, again, similar to what exists today. Details on 49th Street, and then going around the building on 50th Street is sort of similar condition to 49th, below the marquee. And then finally, on the Avenue of the Americas side, again, it's these outer piers now here and here that say GE building, and the proposal is to replace the granite in those locations and put in new panels here and here. Again, the letter sizes will get slightly shorter. The overall height will be slightly taller because the letters and logo need to be stacked. But again, this is sort of consistent with the changes that have occurred over time in the building. As Andrew said, the parent company of NBC has always had its name in this location, as it has had on the roof of the building, and this carries forward that sign, that sort of building identity that's so integral to these proposals. Never mind, I got it. So the last piece of our presentation is the second application is for work at 1250 Avenue of the Americas. As I mentioned, this was historically known as the RCA Building West. It was constructed at the same time as 30 Rockefeller Plaza, but was a separate sort of wing of the tower, and is a 12-story or 16-story commercial building that fronts onto Avenue of the Americas. You can see an overall view here of the base of the building. The work that we're proposing is here at the center. You can see this photograph. There are 3 marquees in this location. They were constructed around 1990, approved by the commission. And the proposal is to remove this one and this one, the 2 outer ones, and to reclad the one in the center. In addition to the work of the marquee, there's a program of improving the lighting of Barry Faulkner's Intelligence Awakening Mankind mosaic, which is in the back of the vestibule. The lighting there today is really inadequate, hasn't been well maintained, and the program, in addition to work the marquee, involves enhancing the lighting so that one can really experience this mosaic as it was meant to be seen. Some views, long views of the building across the plaza from 1251 Avenue of the Americas, and then a detailed view. One thing to note is, historically, 6th Avenue developed differently, or was treated differently than the rest of the center. It was always thought of as the sort of entertainment complex for Rockefeller Center. When the building was finished in 1933, the 6th Avenue elevated ran up 6th Avenue. That came down in the late 30s, but the way that the designers and planners for the center thought of this area, this faced west, and it faced west to the theater district. And it was meant to really engage with the theater district. With that was the construction, obviously, of Radio City Music Hall, and as well the Center Theater, which was 1 block to the south. The Roxy Theater was half a block to the west on 50th Street. So this whole little sub-district had a very different character than the rest of the center. And we think that's quite relevant in this proposal. Obviously, all that remains of the historic theaters is Radio City, with its multi-story blade signs and its marquee. I think it sort of recalls what this stretch of 6th Avenue was historically. So views sort of from across the street of the exterior of the building, and then from within the vestibule. The way it operates today, it almost feels like it's sort of this enclosed room, and it really was meant to be a bit more porous than that. But you can see the mosaic, Barry Faulkner's mosaic here, and a bit more clearly here. These lights, which are installed off the back of this pier, are no longer working. And then these lights here are really inadequate to do the job of illuminating the mural. So the idea is to integrate new lighting into the marquee and across the back of the piers. I'll also sort of just point out this is the sort of structural support for each of these marquees. It's a return in the sort of two-tone bronze design. The idea is to take this off and reclad this in something that we think is a bit more sympathetic. Some longer views again of the building in context. This is 1250 here at the center. Radio City just to the left, and then the 2 flanking sort of holdout buildings on either side. You don't really see the mosaics until you're much closer to the building, or actually entering in past the piers. And then this view here, looking north up Avenue of the Americas. Here's the entry to the building. We've got the illuminated bracket sign for the subway entry, and then Radio City to the north. looking at sort of historically, this photo from probably from the 1940s, following the removal of the elevated line. The elevated would have basically obscured this view completely of, certainly of the mosaics up at this upper section of the entry. But you can see that the mosaics set back about 10 or 12 feet are in deep shadow in this photograph. This photograph from 1985 is from the time of designation. So this is when the center was designated. And at that time, there were already 3 large box awnings, as the permit notes, sort of large projecting canopies that said RCA building. They were signed back at that time. So beginning probably from the early 1980s through the present, there have been 3 marquees in this location. And then a current day photograph showing the current marquees that are in this location that were approved in about 1990. And then just some historic images, just going back to the point about 6th Avenue being sort of developed as the entertainment complex, as the designation report says, the entertainment complex for the center. So this photograph here of Radio City Music Hall at 1270 Ave of the Americas, the 2 blade signs on the west and south sides of the building, and then the marquee that wrapped the corner. And then this photo of the Center Theater. Again, two very tall blade signs and a marquee that wrap the corner. This is directly south of 1250 Ave of the Americas. And then just to the east was the Newsreel Theater, which was part of the Associated Press building. So looking at this key plan, this is 1250 Ave of the Americas here up at the top on the dashed line. The Center Theater was here to the south, Radio City to the north, and then down here was the Newsreel Theater. This is a photograph a bit earlier than the other 2, just showing the presence of the elevator, what 6th Avenue must have been like at that time. You really sort of couldn't see much of the base of these buildings, and perhaps explains the scale and size of these very tall bracket signs and blade signs. But all of this is just to say that this side of the center is very different than the 5th Avenue side, or even what one sees as one walks down the heart of it, down the Plaza or Channel Gardens. It's a different sort of more commercial, more entertainment-focused portion of the center. And then some existing views of the other sides of the building. So again, as we were looking at before, the 49th Street marquee and the 50th Street marquee, these are these sort of 3-tiered, very tall marquees. We've looked at those as a design inspiration for our marquee that we're proposing for 6th Avenue. A bit more compressed, but similar in its approach and deco detailing. And then the Rockefeller Plaza side of the building, a bit more heroic than the Avenue of the Americas side, looking right at the sunken plaza and having a very different feel than the Avenue of the Americas side of the building. And then here is a proposed ground floor elevation illustrating the position of the proposed marquee and giving you a sense of this overall complex that NBC Universal will be inhabiting on the west side of the ground floor of the building. And with this, I'm going to have Michael Gatlini take you through the programming and the design. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cass, very much.
Hello, I'm Michael Gatlini at Gatlini Shepherd. It's my pleasure to continue describing this application. So before going into the interior, just to orient you, 1954, the inception of The Tonight Show starring Jack Parr, entertainment history was made on a nightly basis. Now, as far as this proposal, history returns since 1972 with The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon back to 30 Rock, continuing the legacy of the longest running, regularly scheduled entertainment program in broadcast history. So this is something that both with the marquee proposal on the outside, there has been a lot of regeneration and replacement of NBC programming on the ground floor. From the center, from the existing and landmark NBCU lobby, located in the center off of the 50th and 49th Street entryways, there is a redevelopment of sort of center to western pull through to the 1250 Avenue of the America portico front. basically rebalancing from the 30 Rock Plaza to 6th Avenue, the east-west connection and continuation. And so this is the NBCU project, which was brought before you to introduce and recreate the grand stair up to a mezzanine rotunda space, which is the new introduction and facility for all of the NBCU guest services, which includes all tour, show, and also NBCU Experience retail store facility. So that is at the center. And then what currently is on the southeastern portion, which is the existing retail experience store, that is now being relocated and moving directly to this location, just off of the main lobby of 1250 Avenue of the Americas. So the proposal, as Cass has mentioned, is to, with the existing above and the proposal at the bottom, is to remove 2 of the 3 marquees, to recenter and reclad the existing center marquee with an enhanced both signage and decorative program, which, as you can see in the 2 plans, creates the possibility that for access off the north and access off the south, to have a cleaner and more visibly connected portico entryway, as well as to create about 2/3 additional viewing as a view portal through this portal and this portal of the historic mosaic murals. This is the existing elevation, as you see from the 16-story building of the tripartite scheme and the composition of the 2 smaller and the larger center, with the 3 existing marquees here, and the proposal for the removal of the 2 outer portals and the enhancement of the center. The existing, showing just the other elements of the facades with the lighting, the limestone and granite sort of arches that go through it, signage panels which are there, an existing black and bronze kiosk which runs through the interior of the center, as well as then the existing marquees themselves. The proposal is, with the removal of those and the enhancement and the recladding of the existing, is to develop, using the precedent of the 49th and 50th Street marquees, a 3rd entrance, 3rd marquee, in a 2-tier setback composition, setting up a black metal and stainless steel striping in an Art Deco treatment, similar to those other 2 marquees, with illuminated signage which announces The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. In addition, a 2-dimensional resurfacing of the existing marquee with the new NBC Studios logo that would wrap on all 4 sides. This is an elevation on the interior, looking from the inside across 6th Avenue. And this is important because it begins to show just the relationship of these 3 marquees. In addition, which shows the existing steel frame, which is mounted into a footing foundation, which is there, and the arch, the center the same way, and of course the north identical to that. In addition, these are existing light poles, which are mounted off of the building, which the proposal is to use those locations, but to create a new enhanced light element. Also, there are existing spotlights, which are very strong, visible spotlights from the inside when you come from the inside out, which light up the current murals. The proposal, removal of the south and north, enhancement of the center, so before, after, before, after. And what I believe that you see is that you see a recentering of the center, tripartite organization, which creates a more vertical rather than a horizontal whole to the concept, as well as providing an enhanced wayfinding through into the center. This also shows two new blind bronze valances for two of the side murals, as well as then what will be pretty much an unexposed light trough with new spotlights lighting the main center. And this shows then, again, the existing kiosk, which is rebranded on this interior side. To the left, showing the existing section through the entire portico and the proportion of this really beautiful portico with the arches, the limestone arches, as well as then these kind of angled and centered polychromatic murals which go throughout. The existing proportion of the marquee which is there, and the dimensions for that, and the proposal which we're increasing the dimensions to create that two-tiered, two-stepped deco-inspired sensibility for this marquee of another 10 inches. And it decreases the height with the ability to wrap underneath the existing reclad marquee of 1.5 inches, which then allows us to create new lay lights and also metal panels that are also reminiscent and used as a precedent from the 49th and 50th marquees. And this shows then the existing exposed lights, the lights which are on those two piers, and the more, what I believe would be refined light valance, which shields the light source, and also the light trough, which places the lights lower to light the center. This is what you will see as then the cladding, the recladding of this structure, which is here, which is reclad in a fluted style, which is in bronze, which runs throughout the center, which is of course an abstraction of kind of Egyptian Art Deco lotus motif, which goes through the center through a lot of doors and different other accessories, flower stands, etc. The proposed in terms of proportion, which is a two-tiered, 18-inch two-tier for a total of 3 foot high, with illuminated signage, with the same LED system which is used on the roof, but this is a much finer version which simulates a casing of neon in a blue and red, which corresponds again to the 49th and 50th Street marquees.
That's not Jimmy Fallon, is it? Figure with the briefcase.
This is not. He's making it.
Just checking, just checking.
He's not as transparent as you may think. But this is showing that then the proportion of it, which only increases the overall height by another 7.5 inches to be able to get an even 18-inch stepped tier to get above and over the current glass ceiling and drainage system. And this shows a side view of, again, smaller letters in proportion to the proportion of both sides. And this shows the recladding in a section. This is all in gray, the sort of existing marquee which is there, and then a recladding of that, leaving all of the drainage details and pier configurations intact. The RCP, the ceiling underneath, which are these glazed light lines, light troughs, which again simulate almost to the rhythm and T, the other two marquees with a flat metal panel running around. Details of the lettering, of the signage of a aluminum box sign with both the blue and the red neon as a tray inside of that, with these stainless steel horizontal lines which run throughout. And on the other side, the NBC Studios logo with the Tonight Show above. And finally, the before and the after proposal for that, which shows what I believe is on these two sides unequivocally to create enhanced visibility, not only the entry as wayfinding through into the portico, but also of the mural, and as well from the side as a kind of three-quarter view perspective of the current box-like to then the two main entries which people use. About 80% of all people entering through go through one of those two side portals. And then across from 6th Avenue, looking back onto Radio Center,
Okay.
and also the interior of the proposed facade.
Okay, well done. Stay where you are. Maybe you and Cass stand for a moment in case we have questions about either aspect of this. Marjorie, first.
Yeah, starting at the end, working to the beginning. Just a question about the idea of this marquee. If the concept is to remove those two marquees so that you can reveal the mosaic better, then why is the concept of the central marquee to make it more opaque and bigger because it reveals less of the mosaic? I mean, how did you get to that approach? As opposed to, say, replacing the marquee entirely, that's another thing. Like, why did it end up being a recladding as opposed to a new design?
Well, it's something which, in order to not touch the structure of or go into landmark fabric of the piers, the idea was, because our position was that the existing marquees, even though that they're made of glass and metal, the glass itself is quite opaque, and also the glass ceiling is opaque as well. So that did not create, the existing marquee does not create a transparency in its current state. And so it was really seen for the benefit of the efficiency of the structure, which to use the existing structure and drainage was to not take out the existing, but essentially to reclad it. And then to use the precedent, of course, signing this for the Tonight Show, of treating it as a kind of sister marquee to the 49th and 50th Streets.
Okay. Yes?
But Michael has
Yeah, Michael. Devonshire, do you have a question? No.
touching. Okay, and my next question has to do with the Comcast sign at the top. Is there a fixed rule about where the peacock sits? Must it always be on the top? Is it allowed to be on the side? The reason I ask is because the letters are actually very small, and there's an image where you show it from a distance where you're not going to be actually able to read the Comcast. It's sort of cut off at the bottom.
Right, there was a view
I would think-
on 46th Street and 6th Avenue where the bottom of the letters are actually cut off, but as you move further back, you will actually see the letters.
Mm-hmm.
But to answer your question about the logo is together. It is how it
On
how it
top
is.
as opposed
The
to
peacock
next
is
to.
centered over the word Comcast, and that's how it is on letterhead, business cards, and
So it'd be weird if it all
Yeah.
of a sudden
Right.
was there. Okay.
they travel.
Okay.
They sort of travel together in that arrangement.
Okay. Comprehensively presented, expertly presented. And we'll go to testimony now, come back for a discussion. Barbara Zay. No, none.
Barbara Zay of the Historic Districts Council. I'd like to state that our comments are limited to just the final portion of the presentation today, item 22, 1250 of the Avenue of the Americas. HDC wishes to commend the applicant on this fantastic project. By emulating the style of other marquees in the Rockefeller Center complex and in the surrounding neighborhood, the proposed replacement for the central marquee is sensitive to both the building and its broader Midtown context. The removal of the two marquees flanking the center is a welcome change, as they had unfortunately been obscuring the 1933 Art Deco glass mural above the doorway. The mural, entitled Intelligence Awakening Mankind, is described in the designation report as, quote, the most brilliantly polychromatic work at Rockefeller Center. HDC is glad to see more of this beautiful mural exposed for public enjoyment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Other testimony? I have a letter that was sent to me by Carolyn Maloney, member of Congress representing this district, conveying strong support of the application, both the lighting and the signage changes, 30 Rockefeller Plaza, which will be in the record from Congresswoman Maloney. I guess nothing further to add from you all?
You need more resolutions?
Don't have it. I assume you wouldn't be jumping up to give it to me if it was.
Just guess what they said.
Approval. I mean, they haven't sent it to us, so I'm not saying. Thank you. All right, without attempting to authenticate it, these are, oh, yeah, the affidavit from your esteemed counsel. Recommends, we'll take them, and they did it separately, of course, the first, let me just make sure I'm in the right ones here. The marquee and the installation of the new marquee recommends approval of the application. And on the signage, similar, full board in both cases, recommending approval of the application to change the 30 Rock. Okay, Community Board 5. And let me just preface it by my comments of support for the application by commending the team and by commending Comcast for taking so seriously and appropriately so this incredibly significant New York City and world landmark, frankly, the Rockefeller Center and these elements of Rockefeller Center. Obviously, the thought and care and sensitivity to it is evident in every aspect of this application, but you are going forward, you're adapting to modernity, and but at the same time respecting, to my reading, respecting in the right way the importance of the history and the character and the aesthetics of this gem. So all in all, I think very approval. I strongly urge support and approval, and a completely appropriate, very interesting. And you add some things that are great. I think the exposure of the mural; those are sidelights, because the overall, but important sidelights. But the overall thrust of the application in both respects is completely appropriate, and welcome to Comcast. Fred?
I would concur. To me, this is about the least controversial of any very significant change to a very significant landmark that I've come across. Least controversial because it's so well thought through and so well presented. I will just add maybe a slight irrelevancy, perhaps. I might have been less persuaded that the logo of the current owner, whoever that current owner might be, is less important than that the font express the era of the building. But that cat is out of the bag long ago when RCA itself changed its own logo, and then GE came along, and so everybody was using logos at this point, and I'm not going to try to go back and say, well, now let's get a font that works with 1930. But maybe the reason I'm not going to suggest that at all is simply because the current Comcast proposal, I think, actually goes back to some degree to the original RCA sign, more at least than the GE sign does, or the earlier or the later of the two RCA signs. So all in all, the sign is to me, it's a betterment than the GE sign. I like it more than I like the GE sign. The color of the lighting at night, as well as the whole arrangement of the letters and so forth, the slightly smaller version of it. I mean, even to the extent, as has been pointed out, even by you, that there are aspects of the city which will not see the full sign. With regard to the changes down below, I think they're all perfectly non-controversial, have been done before for the most part, and I think all these are better than what's there now. In terms of the marquee on 6th Avenue, restoring the central bay for the marquee and opening up the two side flanking bays seems to me to be a step forward, allowing the inner part of that wonderful porch to be, and its murals to be seen. So I think congratulations all around.
Michael, Devonshire.
I agree with those comments. I was going to say the same thing about the Comcast logo. It's actually a step in the right direction. Very well done presentation. Again, the only issue that I would have, and it's very minor, is the obscuring of the in the central marquee area, the raising of the height of that marquee. But it's so minor that I really can't object to it. This is excellent. Thank you.
Diana.
Yeah, I think it's a great presentation, and also it's totally appropriate. I think that the new logo signage up on the top of the building is actually, it's going to look better and really attractive, well done. I think that the the signage down below, the size signage is very appropriate and suitable, and everything is basically replacing previous signage in an appropriate and sensitive way. And I think that the change in the marquee to the single marquee works very well. I think the LED lighting is totally appropriate for Rockefeller Center and the spirit of Rockefeller Center and the modern presentation of Rockefeller Center, whilst still retaining enough of the Art Deco character to work, I think, very, very well. Art Deco is actually my favorite period, so I feel very, very comfortable with all of the signage that is proposed. I think it's just extremely appropriate and well done.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree that the application is beautifully presented. Thank you. Very comprehensive. And I think that all the proposed changes are appropriate, and in particular with the subject of the main sign, having a sign up there is actually emblematic of the building. It's actually very much a piece of the building, which ended up going towards the subject of zoning, where it became a part of the building where you could have a sign on the top. This is really part of the design. So, or it became to be thought of that way. And then I think that the marquee, though a little bit bulky, I understand what is driving it, and I appreciate that approach. And I just want to point out, though, that there may be a reason that there's always been marquees on the left and the right. When it rains there during the torrential downpours, the rain cascades off the face of the building, and I think those little marquees were installed there for that reason.
Very thoughtful, very respectful. I think actually the peacock may be the smartest element. I think it makes it more RCA than even the original RCA sign, but excellent presentation.
I agree. I think it's a really very carefully thought through approach. I think that the work at the base of the building with the new lettering is obvious and easy. I think that the marquee the removal of the marquees is fantastic and will really open up that building and both restore it to a more historically correct period and also really take advantage of the mural. I think the lighting solutions in the entry area are especially ingenious and really appreciated. I think that the signs at the top are appropriate. The only comment I would make on them is that, I mean, the problem is that Comcast has too many darn letters. You know, GE, RCA, 3 letters, it's easy. And by having this many letters, they're very close together. which none of the previous letters were, and kind of in the style of the period, they were always kind of spaced out, and there was a lot more space. I would suggest that if they were interested in doing it, their sign is 40 feet shallower than the old one. Space it out a little bit. It'd be more appropriate, but I think it's fine as it is, and I think it's going to be fine.
Okay.
I agree with things that have already been said for the most part. I also think that it was a good presentation. And that the changes seem to be changes that are necessary to keep moving with the times, and that maybe Jimmy Fallon deserves a second marquee. It was some kind of a nod to a change in the dynasty. So I think that everything, I think that there's very little to really criticize, and I think that this is both the lettering, the marquees, and just the general concept for how to integrate the new with the old was well thought out, and it's a good presentation.
Okay, so with that, we'll close the hearing, please, with a motion and a second. And number 22 I'll do first, then maybe ask someone else to do 23. Certificate of Appropriateness, Manhattan, 1250 Avenue of the Americas, Rock Center, individual landmark. Application to replace the marquees. Recommend approval, finding that the removal of the two previously approved canopies flanking the central portion, flanking the central portal, and the existing light fixtures will eliminate non-historic features from the building which partially obstruct from view the mosaic mural within the exterior vestibule, and will allow for the restoration of the granite and limestone piers at these outer portals, at the redesign of the previously approved canopy at the building entry as a theater marquee, will be in keeping with the presence of marquees at other entries at this building and at other buildings within the landmark complex. That the 6th Avenue side of Rockefeller Center was where the theater and entertainment uses were historically located, and retaining and redesigning the canopy at this western edge of the center would be in keeping with the character of the 6th Avenue end of the complex. That the style, form, design, and metal materials of the redesigned canopy will relate to those features of the marquees on the building entries on the side streets, thereby unifying the language of the building marquees, and will recall those features of marquees at the theater entrances at other buildings within the Rockefeller Center complex. That the two-tiered form specifically recalls the design of the marquees on the side streets, while being appropriately different to respond to its location. That while the cladding will make the marquee taller than the existing, it will be set lower within the opening, and that in connection with the removal of the two outer canopies will not significantly overwhelm the entrance. That the LED signage with a metal housing on the marquee will be designed to evoke the historic exposed neon tube signage found on the side street marquees. That the proposed light fixtures to light the interior vestibule will be incorporated well into the design of the marquee, and that removing the canopies at the outer portals and the existing unsympathetic light fixtures and incorporating new lighting within the marquee will illuminate brilliantly the mosaics to enhance the experience of the exterior vestibule and the mosaic mural.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Approved. Now 23, I'll go ahead and do it. 30 Rockefeller Center individual landmark. Application to replace neon signs at the tower of 30 Rock, a skyscraper part of an Art Deco style commercial office and entertainment complex. Recommend approval on this as well, finding that the removal of the existing incised granite signs from the building's base will not eliminate original or significant historic fabric. That the new granite facing at the pier bases will match the historic and surrounding granite. That the proposed locations at the main entrance portal pier bases, overall design, width, scale, and gilded finish of the new incised signs at the east, west, north, and south main building entrances are in keeping with those features of the historic and replacement signs at these entrances. That the locations at the uppermost 2 stories at the north, south, and west setback facades, internal illumination, and overall heights and widths of the proposed electrified signs are in keeping with those features of the original and subsequent replacement signs at these facades. That holes left in the facades by the removal of the existing illuminated sign armatures from the topmost stories on the north north, south, and west facades will be patched to match the appearances of the surrounding facade components, and the proposed new armatures at these locations will be attached to the limestone facades with stainless steel anchors, thereby protecting the building from future damage due to water infiltration or corrosion. That the new armatures for the proposed electrified signs will be painted to match the underlying limestone and decorative aluminum spandrels at the facades, and will then blend visually with these components. That the design of the lettered components of the electrified signs at the north and south facades is in keeping with that of the original signs. That the outline style design of the graphic components of the electrified signs at the north, south, and west facade will be harmonious with the lettered designs of the original replacement and proposed signs. That the change in the manner of illumination from electrified gas to LED technology will not result in a substantial change to the visual character of these signs, and that therefore the proposed electrified and incised signs will reflect the commercial spirit of the historic signs at the crown and the base of the building, and will maintain the special architectural and historic character of these buildings and of the Rockefeller Center individual landmark. Second again, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? No opposed. That's approved. Thank you. Both approved. Thank you.